In this presentation, you'll be introduced to the advantages and limitations of collecting data via remote surveys, as well as your specific information needs. This will allow you to make an informed decision about whether or not remote data collection is an appropriate and feasible approach to use for food security and market monitoring. To guide you through this process, we'll make reference to a decision-making tree specifically developed for mVAM, which we'll walk you through during this tutorial. The first three considerations to take into account when deciding whether or not to use remote data collection are 1. Do you need frequent, regular data, weekly, monthly, or quarterly? 2. Do you need real-time information? And 3. Are there physical barriers or safety reasons that prevent face-to-face surveys? If the answer to all three of these questions is no, then remote data collection may not be what you're looking for. Consider alternative ways to collect data that will better meet your needs, such as face-to-face surveys. If the answer to at least one of these three questions is yes, proceed to the next set of considerations regarding your specific information needs. The next factor to consider is how complex is the data you want to collect. If you're looking to collect data on complex indicators, such as income expenditures, the Food Consumption Score Nutrition Index, or if you need to ask questions that require enumerators to observe or attend in person, and if you're using a long questionnaire, more than 20 questions, then mVAM is not the most appropriate approach. It's better to collect this type of information through an in-person survey, where an enumerator will help probe and clarify responses. However, if you're looking to collect data on simple indicators, such as the Reduced Coping Strategies Index, commodity prices, community-level information through key informants, or simple yes and no questions, or slightly more complex indicators, such as the Standard Food Consumption Score and short multiple-choice questions, using fewer than 20 questions, then mVAM may work for you. If so, move on to the next consideration. Next, consider the quality and coverage of cell phone network connectivity in the location you want to collect data. If the network exists and service is consistent, then mVAM may be viable. If the network exists but service is variable, then you should note that it might take longer to reach your target sample. If there is no network connection, collecting data through mVAM will not be possible, as it requires a mobile network connection. Alternatives to mobile surveys include calling a small number of key informants on satellite phones. If you've established that the network coverage is sufficient, you must then take into account how common mobile ownership is in the areas of interest. If it's very widespread, then mobile data collection could work well. If it varies, for example, it's good in urban areas but poor in rural parts, or it varies among specific population subgroups, such as the elderly, women, or the poor, you can try mVAM, but be careful to design your sample well and to accept bias in your data. This will be considered in the next phase of the decision tree. If mobile ownership is low, under 50%, then before you rule out mVAM as an option, first assess the target of your surveys and the nature of the data you want to collect. If you want to obtain household-level information, then you can try to collect data using mVAM, but be ready to accept bias in your results. If you're looking to obtain community-level information through key informants, mVAM could be useful. Now that you've determined that remote mobile-based data collection is feasible, you should decide whether the mVAM approach is appropriate. This depends on whether or not you're ready to accept some sort of bias in your data, such as gender, age, or income. Note that the mVAM team works hard to understand and minimize bias in mVAM data, and guidance is available. If you're not ready to accept any kind of bias in your data, then mVAM is not recommended. If you're willing to accept some level of bias or are interested in monitoring trends, then there is one final consideration to take into account before deciding whether mVAM is appropriate and feasible for your information needs. The last question to address is, are you able and willing to devote resources, funding, time, and staff to set up and follow the project? If not, mVAM is not recommended. Setting up an mVAM system requires investing time and money, especially over the first 3 months. If you're able and willing to invest, then we encourage you to start setting up an mVAM system. Thank you for watching this tutorial about the advantages and disadvantages of remote surveys.